All right, take two, because I recorded for about a minute and a half and my microphone was nowhere in the vicinity of where I am. So hello everybody, welcome to another new player guide. This week we are edging ever closer to the end of the X-Men. I don't know what I will do with myself when it's all done, but Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, a long time coming. We got a little bit delayed just due to things like the anniversary week, and then Magneto came out, and then I think I just had an off week somewhere in there where just couldn't get this done. But here we are. We are the new player guide for Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. And pretty excited to talk about this one. I imagine that having put the feelers out to try to get some insight from the one Cyclops player I know that is diehard Cyclops, I asked him his thoughts on what the best card in the pack was, and he returned a thesis paper to me. So I feel like I'm at least mildly prepared and at least know where somebody who plays Cyclops on a regular basis, where their head is at. But before we get to that, I wanted to give my community spotlight for the episode. This week, we're just kind of in a little bit of a low period. We just got through Magneto. We're kind of waiting for previews on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it took me a while, and this is why I'm a couple weeks late on it. The Pools Giving episode of Critical Encounters, where they go through the Deadpool pack. They have Fantasy Flight staff on the episode. They have fans also putting some stuff in. At some point you'll hear me talk. I'm on there for all of a minute and a half, and yeah, it's just a really good episode. If you care about Deadpool, it is I think a must listen to. Don't sleep on it. But yeah, that's going to be my recommendation for the week. Go listen to the Critical Encounters episode about Deadpool. Scott Summers, who, as I'm looking at him right now, this is probably very much his general look, but I realize now, for the first time ever, that he has a lot of X-Men Evolution vibes going on in this picture. I just feel like this is very much the young Scott Summers. Let me just correct the lights here real quick. Oh, that looks atrocious. That's too much. That's just right. I just imagine that over the course of the half an hour while we're recording this, we're probably just going to run into a great amount of the sun shifting, so let's get ahead of that. So, Scott Summers, he is a 3 recovery alter ego with the mutant trait, and he has the ability that you may include X-Men allies from any aspect in your deck, so that's a deck building thing. Don't know that that's been something that's come up in the new player guides yet. We've seen Cable, I guess, allows you to have side schemes of any type, but we really haven't seen a cross aspect hero in such a bold way in quite a while. And this, like I said, I think this might be the second hero as we're going retroactively backwards. Hadn't even considered that, but yes, you can include allies of any type, of any aspect, as long as they're X-Men allies. So that is super important to the deck building. I think that's partially why, spoiler alert, my friend who hosts the Talkin' Snick podcast, big Wolverine fan, big Scott Summers fan in terms of this game, said that Scott Summers is maybe the most important card in the pack. And I think that's ironically relevant. But then he has the constant training ability, which is an action. Search your deck for a tactic upgrade, add it to your hand, limit once per round. This is part of Cyclops that I think is really important, but that I don't personally utilize enough. When I first got the pack, I just the idea of having the full card pool, having the ability to pick out any upgrade was just not a tactic upgrade. It was not something that was necessarily on my mind. Obviously, the pack itself comes with tactics. You're not kind of left high and dry there, but I do think that as the card pool has expanded, the tactics that are on hand have gotten better and better, and there's more just options so that you can kind of tinker with your deck enough to make it into something a little bit more personalized. But I do think that in terms of a alter ego, I would agree. The ability to put any X-Men ally into your deck is super important to Scott. I think it is very thematic. It makes him into a different X-Men hero than all the other heroes we've looked at. I do think that the tactic part, like I said, is something that I want to keep in mind, especially going forward, looking at all the cards in the pack, but then also just kind of in the deck selection for the example this week, also keeping that in mind. Then we've got Cyclops, the hero side, which is 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense, hero X-Men with the Optic Blast ability. So it is an action attack. Spend 1 resource of any type, deal 3 damage to an enemy with an upgrade attached. Limit once per round. So this is another part of what I think makes Cyclops into a very good hero. He leans himself towards leadership a lot. I think that the ability to have any X-Men ally in his deck is going to make you want to have X-Men allies. It's going to push you into leadership. I do think that because you can kind of ignore parts of any hero to say, you know what, I like what this hero does, but I'm not going to include this part of the card. If they have, enough little knobs, you can kind of ignore one of them. I would say that Cyclops in himself could be fairly good in aggression, just because he can throw upgrades onto enemies and then, deal this damage to them. And, he's taking his 5 hand size, which I suppose that's an important thing. He does have 6 hand size on here. He has 5 hand size on his hero side, 10 health. But he's taking, you're kind of dog-earing one of the cards to be that 3 damage. But having that 3 damage on hand is super good. Obviously, there's the caveat of putting an upgrade onto something. We can go round and round and round nitpicking parts of the card. But I do think the ability to always have that 3 damage on hand makes taking out enemies easier. If you want to get into overkill, he can put enemies into a range where a attack can very easily overkill into the villain. And I think overall there's a lot to Cyclops that is outside of just his kind of field commander ability. Overall, yeah, I think that kind of makes up for the fact that he's got 1 attack. But overall, yeah, I think he's good at defending, he's good at thwarting, and he has a way to deal damage without needing to exhaust himself. Next up, we will look at Cyclops. We'll look at, I've been doing that so much this last couple weeks. We're going to look at Phoenix, 3 cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, psionic and X-Men traded with 3 health. And she has the responsibility, when Phoenix enters play, choose a Cyclops card in your discard pile and add it to your hand. This has a lot of applications. I know one of the ones that was outlined by Ryan from Sinister. This is one way that if you lose your Visor, which we will get to in a second, you can just get it back. I think just in general, this has always been a good card in my mind. She costs 3, which I think is a pretty average cost for an ally. She's got well-rounded stats, and the fact that she can buy you back one of the cards in your discard pile that Cyclops needs is really good. It's not as thematic as Cyclops for the Phoenix deck, where he is bumping up the stats on her Phoenix Force card, her, Unleashed versus Subdued or whatever it is. But still, at the same time, I do think that her just playing that support role is so good and makes her to be, just a card that you do want to try to recur multiple times. If you can go through your deck and you can time her to go into the discard pile at just the right time before you shuffle up, hopefully you can play her a second or a third time in the game. And I think that she's going to be super helpful because, 2 thwart, 2 attack, always good. Next up, we've got the Ruby Quartz Visor. This is another part of what is important to Cyclops. And I think if you know Cyclops at all, you know why this is important. This is the only way that he can kind of control his optic blasts. But it is a 2-cost upgrade. It is an item, so you can grab it with the shopping spree. And it has the hero resource of exhaust this card and generate an energy resource for your optic blast ability. This attack gains piercing and ranged. So what's most helpful about this is that then you're not dog-earing a card in your hand to go towards his optic blast ability. The ability to have piercing to break up toughs, the ability to have range to avoid retaliate, just makes Cyclops all the better. This is probably a card that I would look for pretty quickly, although as pointed out, there will be other cards in this pack that sort of trivialize finding Ruby Quartz Visor in a fun way. But overall, I think it's just a good item. If you have it, play it. If you don't, try to find it. It is overall, I think it's a good card. I also think just adding Pierced and Ranged. Let's see, what's that card called? Overwhelming Force, I think it's called. So this is kind of a little bit off the beaten trail. I often find that trying to find something to do with Directed Force is not always easy, but I have found myself very much considering Directed Force for a Cyclops deck, just because that you're probably going to have piercing and or ranged. Well, you're going to have piercing and ranged on a pretty regular basis if you're playing the deck right. So I do think the Directed Force does have a purpose in this deck. It is one of, outside of like maybe Domino and Hawkeye, one of the only other places that I consider this card for on a regular basis. And obviously like Overkill is something that's kind of easily found, but this easily gets edged out by other cards often, I find. But for Cyclops, I really like Directed Force. Just over here breaking format in so many different ways. But yes, overall, I think this is probably one of the best cards in this pack. I don't know if it's my favorite card, but if I remember correctly from that thesis statement, this might be the best card in his pack. Then we've got 2 copies of Practiced Defense, a 0-cost upgrade tactic, important. Attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. It is temporary, and attached enemy gets -1 attack. So temporary is actually something that I'm surprised we didn't get more of, or that we just haven't seen more of once they introduced it. But basically what it means is, actually, let me look this up real quick. I should have done this. I think it was on my list of things to do. Okay, so real quick, I looked it up. So just to make sure that I had the actual proper definition of temporary, didn't lead anybody astray here. Temporary is a card with temporary must be discarded from play at the end of the round. So that's going to be after... I just like to have this on hand. So you've got... So we'll pop this out of the way real quick. So obviously you got the way that your turn progresses and everything. And at the end of the round, I believe is... I thought it... Okay, sorry, I thought the insert card actually called it out. The end of the round... Unless I'm completely dyslexic here. How am I... The end of the... Well, I'm almost certain. I'm sorry, this is... I thought this was going to go a little bit smoother. The end of the round, I believe, is at the end of the villain phase. I thought it was officially called out here, and it's not. A lot of good that did it, but either way, from experience playing with Magneto, because I believe his armor does this, playing with X-23 because several of her cards care about this. The end of the round is going to be after. Well, first of all, it wouldn't have any purpose if it was at the end of the hero phase, but basically this is going to go on to an enemy, whether it's the villain or the minion. It's going to lower their attack, and it's going to fall off basically before you take your turn again. Like I said, I'm surprised we didn't get to see more of this. I don't know what applications you would put it onto. I suppose you could have probably had with Iceman. That would have really taken Frostbite and lowered its power level in quite a bit. But either way, I like this idea of you are using tactics to put upgrades that are very inexpensive or free, basically, onto enemies, and it gives something for Cyclops to aim at. There's not too much to say about this. I think this is just a good setup for getting an upgrade onto an enemy. Lowering their attack is very powerful. I think the max 1 per enemy is very relevant. It can take a enemy that basically you don't have to worry about them anymore because they can't deal damage to you. It can take the villain and just soften their blow, especially in multiplayer, really soften what they're capable of doing in a given turn. And overall, I just think it is a fantastic card for the purposes. It's a very, in Cyclops, it is very good for what it's worth. Just everywhere today. And we've got 2 copies of Priority Target, a 0-cost upgrade tactic. attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy, temporary again, and the interrupt, when an attached enemy is defeated, the player who defeated it draws 2 cards. The Cyclops is just really good for multiplayer. I think he's good in solo too, because something like this, you attach to an enemy, take it out, you get to draw 2 cards. That's great. You're turning 1 card into 2. I do think that part of what makes temporary a little bit of a setback, but I think has to be there, especially with some of these cards, is you're putting them on with purpose. You're putting them on knowing I'm going to take this enemy out this turn. And actually, then it makes me wonder if Cyclops might do really well with the change of fortune, dealing damage on taking enemies out on the enemy phase. He might actually, his stock might go up there, because cards like this, you want to draw 2 cards, and you're happy to draw them whenever. And in some ways, drawing 2 cards during the villain phase is even better, because you've already drawn up to your maximum hand size, and now you get 2 more cards on top of that. It's very like Hall of Heroes-esque, where you're kind of out of sequence getting more cards. So I think this is a superior card to practice defense most of the time. Sometimes lowering attack is just super powerful, but here drawing 2 cards is just great. And overall, like, it costs 0. It's doing what Cyclops wants, and I can't really complain there. Then we've got 2 copies of Ricochet Beam, a 2-cost event attack superpower. Hero attack, deal 3 damage to an enemy, deal 3 damage to an enemy with an upgrade attached. So the nice thing here is that you can just deal 3 damage. If you happen to have an upgrade on somebody, you get to have that bonus damage. They can be the same enemy twice. If you really need to deal like 4 to 6 damage to an enemy, you've got a way to do it within the pack. This is a little bit scaled back from what you might see with other big hero attacks, but it also only costs 2. And let me just make sure I'm not. No, I think there is. Okay, yep. Sorry, there's one other card that is an attack that deals a bunch of damage. This is thematic. I think the art kind of just shows you how good Cyclops is at just finding all the right angles to stab your enemy in the back, even when you're in front of them. And this card's okay. I want to say that I like it. I do like it. I do think that it has a purpose, and I do think that it is useful, but it's just not my favorite card in the pack. And the 2 of us just keep going. Okay, then we've got 2 copies of Exploit Weakness, a 1-cost upgrade, tactic again. In fact, okay, no, I was trying to remember if Ricochet Beam was a tactic. I wanted to make sure I called that out. So, same thing. Again, attached for enemy, max 1 per enemy, temporary again. Increase the amount of damage attached enemy takes from each attack by 1. So that means Ricochet Beam could be dealing 4 and 4. On and on and on. Find all the corner case examples of where you have multiple instances of an attack, or you just have one big attack. This is where I think Cyclops can shine in an overkill deck. You have the ways to gain card advantage. You have the ways to deal additional damage. They're not consistent, although we may get into a different way of handling this in just a moment. But overall, I will say that this is just a cool card. Another way that he is just good in multiplayer. Another reason why he's good in leadership, because the more bodies you have dealing damage, the better this card gets. So suddenly you can double the amount of damage your 1-attack allies are doing. You can take your 2-attack allies and bump them up to 3. I think that another reason, well, I suppose having him in leadership isn't the biggest deal here, but the leadership X-23 ally becomes really, really good. I suppose, well, really, really good might be a little extensive. She becomes better because her first attack, or whatever attack you're doing, deals 4, and then she readies back up, and maybe you put the like designated target, or whatever it's called, practice defense. Like with the leadership X-23 ally, you can just set up the sequence where you just you put tactics on a bunch of enemies, and you just go down the line taking them out, and it can be super funny. I know I saw someone do that, where they had X-23 like take out 3 enemies. They don't know they were playing Cyclops. They didn't get all the benefits from everything. But yeah, this just, like I said, is super good, and I I think that it is maybe the best candidate for why you want to play leadership, because this can just take advantage of it really well. Whereas the other one is just going to lower attack and all that stuff, on and on and on. Then we've got 2 copies of Tactical Brilliance, a 2-cost event, Thwart, Hero Action Thwart. Remove 3 threat from a scheme, choose a tactic card from your discard pile and add it to your hand. This is great because your temporary tactics are going to be in the discard pile all the time. And having your Thwart event complement what you're trying to do is just really cool. Don't have a lot more to say about this card. I think it's just, it thwarts pretty decently, and it just plays into what you already want to do. Having only 2 copies of it means you just want to be very mindful. If this is going to be a value to you, you want to keep it in your hand. Obviously, you're kind of fighting against your hand size overall, but I think that this is the kind of card where in a deck cycle, it would be really great if you could get both instances of it. Then, oh, I'm sorry. We do have, okay, this was just my own mistake. I felt like that wasn't accurate, but yeah, so we have 3 copies of Tactical Brilliance. I apologize. All the better. You can get your cards back even more. That's great. But yeah, I would say that what I said before is still true. I think when you're going through your deck, you want to try to hit this as much as possible, because it's both helping you to manage the scheme and it's also getting you back tactic cards, which do come at a premium. Oh boy. Okay, then we have Field Commander. I think this is my favorite card in the pack, only because of what it does and the fact that it so much shifts what Cyclops is capable of. It is a 1-cost upgrade Field Commander. It is a title. You take the first turn during the player phase. When your turn is done, the player's play proceeds in play order, starting with the first player. You do not take another turn. So, and additionally, each Cyclops upgrade attached to a minion loses the temporary keyword. So this is going to allow you to put tactics onto minions and set them up. Does not change the fact that you can still put tactics onto the villain, but that does mean that you're just going to be able to repeatedly benefit from some of the things on minions. I like this first ability because it means that he's always going to be going first. And then if you're playing a 4-player game, the token is still going to follow around so that you can figure out, okay, so I'm player A, player C, then D, then B is going to go, and you cycle around and around. And I think on the surface, when you're playing with a new player, it's confusing because it makes it sound like the first player token or whatever you're using to signify that just always sits with Cyclops. That's not true. Additionally, that also means that Cyclops is not taking the first attack or the first scheme every turn either. That does move around. Cool card. Like I said, I think it's my favorite just because it changes the game enough. It changes player order. It changes how Cyclops upgrades work. And in this new and interesting twist. So it is a card that I feel like every time I've played with Cyclops, I've tried to hard mulligan for it. And well, I guess in multiplayer. In single player, obviously you're always going first. You're a little less worried about the upgrades losing temporary, but it's still something relevant. And I think just for what it does to the game, it makes it my favorite card. And then last card in the kit is Full Blast, a 1-cost event, superpower, Hero Interrupt. When you use your Optic Blast ability, exhaust Cyclops. This attack deals 8 damage and gains overkill. I understand why there's only 1. This is a very powerful card. It costs 1. Obviously, it has a lot of setup. It does come with hidden costs, but just being able to deal that 3 damage and then deal an additional 8 damage to wherever you're aiming at. Just and it technically doesn't. Well, I suppose it does. It does count as an attack. It doesn't have the attack keyword on it. Actually, okay, let me look at that again. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this card. Put these next to each other. I've been playing this wrong this whole time. Okay, I looked at some FAQs just to make sure. This does deal a total of 11 damage. This is one attack. This is a separate attack, dealing 8 damage. confused because it doesn't have the attack signifier anywhere on here. So I think that could trip up a new player, but that's something important to know is that, I guess, if you're already doing the Optic Last ability, you don't have to worry about stun counters. Really cool card. I think that what's holding it back is just that there's only one copy of it, and it does come with layers of other things that kind of like the one cost is sort of hidden behind the fact that you need to have an upgrade on somebody, which Iceman can help you out with. You do need to be using the Optic Blast ability. You do need to be doing this and that and all this other stuff. And just, yeah, overall, cool card. But let's go look at the example deck. All right, everybody, welcome to the deck example. And actually, this is going to be a double example. One, because I already knew that this creator I featured in the Phoenix episode because they kind of already did some of the legwork for me, and I think they even have it down here. Yes, they have their example decks down here of the other heroes, so I'll probably be back for Colossus and Shadowcat in the next couple weeks. But either way, I already knew this deck existed, and so I wanted to sort of highlight what Cyclops looked like 2 years ago at the point when he was new, because I'm pretty sure this was almost immediately after his pack came out. And finding a good Cyclops deck can be a little difficult, because as I was looking back through his deck selections, even though I kind of had this one earmarked as just probably what I was going to pick, the inclination with Cyclops is basically to use a lot of packs, because he wants a lot of packs, because he can play with a lot of different X-Men allies, and we have 3 waves worth of X-Men allies potentially. I suppose maybe like 2 waves, because I don't know that too many X-Men characters came out in the X-Force wave. Either way, that can make it very hard to kind of find a deck that's going to be able to be new player friendly, to say, hey, you just need Cyclops, you need the core set, and maybe some other packs. And this deck does a pretty good job of that. Mutant Genesis, Cyclops, and Phoenix. So really, you're just adding, and I would say that for the most part, you're probably going to want to get the box associated with the wave that the hero came out in anyway. So Mutant Genesis, I think, is kind of a partial given, but either way, that's all to say, I think this deck is a good example of showing you what you can do with Cyclops with a small card pool. In terms of cards that you're just naturally going to have, I think you have a lot of these. Angel came with Cyclops. I think that he is just he's a good starter ally to have. Let me make this bigger. Come on. Okay. He's a good starter ally to have regardless with a Cyclops deck. He can be swapped out for something better as you're moving forward. In fact, there's stuff from the Age of Apocalypse wave that I think I would probably want to have. Like, there's a couple cheaper basic allies that just do other things, like Beak, and actually Kid Omega, I think, is probably another good example of a card you could sub this out for. And then the other one that was coming to mind was Spike? Oh, Marrow, yes. Angel's not the best card you can have, but I think you could probably, with an expanding card pool, go get cards like Kid Omega, Marrow, Beak, and they can be the same approximate cost, because this is going to cost you 2 to get a character. And if you're just not feeling Angel, there are other examples to go grab. Then we've got Beast, who I think is he's a good card to have in a leadership deck, since he's not trait locked. I think just having Beast can be really good to buy yourself back a resource. He is a little expensive, but I think that in the right deck, you can go get yourself a double resource, and he kind of pays himself back. Blindfold is a card that I don't use very often, but because she's not trait locked, and because she does a pretty good job of setting up the top of your deck. In fact, I'm currently playing Justice Valkyrie, and I almost wonder if I should be considering this card. Oh, they had to go back in the same order. Okay, well, I guess you still know this. You still know the top of your deck, and you can get rid of a problematic card in the top 5. This can be really good defense against something like Shadow of the Past. Make sure that Mr. Sinister never makes it to play. So was that the spoiler? We're going to get to the Nemesis pack in a little bit, but overall, I understand the pick, and I do see purpose with her. We've got Dust, who I think is a fantastic ally. I think she's kind of overlooked a little bit. She comes into play, and when she attacks, when she attacks a minion, she attacks each minion and takes an additional consequential damage. If you can give her extra hit points, and get off a couple more of these, she can be really good for just doing spread damage and just, you know, lessening the amount of threat you're taking from minions. Then we've got Marvel Girl, who comes from the Phoenix pack, and when she attacks a minion, she removes X threat, where X is their scheme. So she can be really good just for hitting a minion that has a lot of scheme and doing more than just her 2. So you're also handling the minion to help to, you know, lessen their impact on the game. Overall, you know, Rachel Summers, Marvel Girl, is maybe not the best card in the entire pack or in the entire deck. I'm not really thinking of a ally that I would substitute her for off the top of my head. Maybe there's an obvious one that I'm just not thinking of, but overall I think that she is just a good, well-rounded ally to have. Then we've got Nightcrawler, who I'm always impressed. I undersell Nightcrawler, and then when he does something for you, it's great. He just has the ability to defend really well. He goes back to your hand, you prevent all the damage. You have to replay him, but for the most part, he's only got 2 health, so maybe you do want to replay him and take advantage of those stats that are pretty good overall, and his additional ability to just take an energy resource and return to your hand and prevent damage is just great. He just bamps the damage away. Phoenix, we already know. Rock Slide. Retaliate on a minion is maybe not the best, but he's got a lot of health, and obviously you want to use him for the attack. He attacks really well too, but I think just he's going to survive long enough for the Retaliate to matter, and that can be a big deal. If you can give him tough, Rock Slide's going to take advantage of that, and he's going to be able to retaliate really well for you. Although I would much prefer to just use him to attack. So I guess then you're looking for a way to ready a friendly character as well. And then Wolverine, who I think is another one that he's very good. The fact that he attacks for 3, and you sometimes have to just give him some downtime to heal back up, and he can just be a minion that stays out for a long period of time, I think is really good. I think there are probably minions now that sort of you could replace him with. I think that there are some. We've seen enough allies up to this point that I think he could be replaced. He is a little expensive. He does take up like basically your entire turn playing him, but overall, I think he's. Like I said, I wouldn't recommend this deck if I didn't think that it didn't have teeth. Wolverine certainly has teeth. Then we've got Game Time, which is just going to be super important for the upgrades that you'll be using, which, what was I thinking of? Oh, this, yeah. Okay, so we'll get to that. But Game Time, I don't know if this expanded out. I don't think we got any more training outside of what we got with Cyclops and... Oh, I'd have to go look. Was all the training solely in Cyclops, or was some of it in Mutant Genesis? It might have all been inside of. It might have all been inside of Cyclops. So Game Time is going to be an important card if you are playing in an archetype that is using the X-Men traded upgrades, the training upgrades. Like this is going to be a staple card for you. Lead from the Front is a card that I didn't think about, and then when I saw it in the deck I was like, oh, actually that is super helpful because it takes what Cyclops is doing and only improves it. You get to give all the characters in front of him. He wants a healthy amount of characters in front of him, and you just improve everything until the end of the phase. And yeah, this was a pick that I at first went, oh, I never even thought about that, and I think they've even reprinted it. This has gotten an X-Men art. So I don't know why it wasn't on my radar, but it would. I didn't even consider it, and that's on me. Effective Leadership, which I want to use this card more. I think in a small card pool, this is a perfect card for it. This is the kind of card that I want to use more. It's just I fail to use it all the time. There are other resources that I just want to use more, but the ability to just bump up an ally when you play it off of this just makes for an even better turn. Makes Wolverine better, takes Rock Slide, makes him even better, and yeah, overall just it takes Marvel Girl. You know, suddenly Marvel Girl is dealing 2 damage and still getting that thwart, or you can just have her thwart for 3. Like overall, this is a great card, and I want to play it more, and if you are playing Cyclops, you probably want to play it. Got the basic resources, got Cerebro. Yes, so this is a card that I wish I used more of. And I use it all the time in I guess I do use it in Psylocke a pretty good amount, but I use it in Phoenix quite a bit too. But I think that in any X-Men deck, it's going to be helpful. Alter Ego action, you exhaust it, and you search the top 5 for an X-Men ally, which is going to be super helpful for Cyclops. And then if you have a psionic character, you can just search your entire deck, and then you add that card to your hand. This is great for consistency, and so it's a good reason to, if you're buying the Cyclops pack, you probably want to get the Phoenix pack as well. Danger Room. You're already going to have this if you have Cyclops, but Alter Ego action, after an X-Men ally enters play, you exhaust Danger Room, search your deck for a training upgrade, and attach it to that ally. So this is a free way to get an attachment onto somebody, able to be used by anybody with the Alter Ego of a mutant. So it can be helpful when you're just doing a multiplayer game and you happen to be playing with, like, Rogue and Gambit, and even like Domino, she's a mutant. You're not worried about the X-Force X-Men trait. You're just looking for, at least in terms of your hero. Overall, I don't think I tap into it enough. But in this deck, it's going to help you with your consistency, which is the important thing to me. And then coordinated attack. Just another tactic. There's only one copy. Oh, there is only one copy. Okay. Coordinated attack, just another tactic that Cyclops can throw onto somebody. Each ally takes less consequential damage when they attack the minion that it's attached to. Can take that upgrade that boosts the amount of damage, or it gives you the additional draw. You can draw 2 cards, and just makes it safer for your allies. Danger Room training, the most important card to keeping this deck doing what it's trying to do. It's trying to go wide, and this is the way to do it. It just improves your thwarting and your attacking, and makes your allies more have more health. And on a character like Wolverine, or once again returning to Rock Slide, this can do so much, and I think it's just a great card. Downtime. This is a card I don't use a lot, but I understand why it's here. Just being able to, you already want to go down to Alter Ego, and just giving Cyclops an extra boost in his recovery is going to be good. Once again, another reason why getting the Phoenix pack is probably going to be on your radar. I think those two really pair off really well. And that's kind of it. Obviously, we've got the entire write-up here. Loved the write-up. I won't go down the line completely. Additionally, I'm trying to think. Utopia. We didn't even talk about Utopia. So Utopia would be a good card for this. So yeah, this bumps up your ally limit, allows you to ready up an X-Men character when an X-Men ally comes into play. Super great. I use it in Iceman all the time. It is great here. For a second, I didn't think it was in the deck, and I was like, you're going to want to get the pack that has Utopia. But what pack has Utopia? But Cyclops. Right up, won't go through all of this, but he makes a lot of good points. Danger Room training on Wolverine gives him 4 attack and 2 thwart. But then the other deck I wanted to look at real quick, and we won't probably do as in-depth of a look, is just Andy R's deck. Mainly because it was more recent. Just as, this is what a Cyclops deck looks like, after a couple of years' time. Again, it's an aggression, so I thought that was another good reason to kind of give it a try, because you're going to be able to get a different aspect and still have all these heroes. So obviously we already talked about Angel. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Angel is just a classic staple. Blindfold we already talked about. Colossus. I think toughness is a very good thing to have. Just coming down for 3 and having that big attack, having toughness is just great. He's basic. All thumbs up. Hulk, which breaks from the regular thing, although I think that we have honorary X-Men in here, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. Did I see something in here why you would do that? What he brought to the deck? He's meant to defend only. Oh, okay. I mean, it does have a good amount of health. Okay, so yeah. Either way, in Andy R we trust, and I think that like I said, this is a good example. Polaris, who getting too many screens. Polaris, another. Oh, I didn't even keep this up. Okay. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so yeah, this is about as bare bones as it gets. So that's what makes it even more impressive. But yeah, Polaris, you're probably already aware of. Wolverine, we already talked about. Game time, power of aggression, attack, Avengers Mansion. So this is just a nice card draw thing. You're getting a different flavor here. Attack team. Once again, core set card. You're probably aware of it. You're probably aware of it, but you may not be using it. And I think that's important, is that just being able to deal the extra 2 damage. Hopefully, when we get into Age of the Shield, this will see more support. X-Jet. This works. I like the X-Jet more when I'm in a multiplayer setting. Just being able, I mean, it's still a good resource outlet, but I think just in a multiplayer setting, being able to generate a resource for someone else at the table is always good. Utopia, like I said, you want Utopia. Attack training is another part of the training cycle. Okay, that did come from Mutant Genesis, so they didn't put all the training into just the one place. So yeah, just giving +2 attack, or giving +1 attack, +2 health is, when I'm playing an X-Men aggression deck, this is a frequent card that I'll fit in as long as I've got, that high saturation of allies. And then Marked is a favorite of mine that I will use outside of Cyclops, but for Cyclops it makes it even better. Turns your attacks against the attached minion into overkill, and that can just be super helpful. Sometimes you kind of find yourself jumping over hoops to, carry over 1 damage, but maybe that breaks a tough. But yeah, overall, I think both of these decks, and they will be in the description, are versions of, what Cyclops looked like when he first came out and where Cyclops has grown into 2024. This has gone on longer than I was expecting. Let's get to the Obligation and Nemesis, and I will catch you over there. Hey, so this is me in the editing bay, and I realized that this was probably just sitting here waiting to be looked at, and I completely overlooked it. But this is the deck that my friend has built around Cyclops, and yeah, this is essentially what Cyclops looks like in the modern age. This would be, I believe, based on the dates, could very well be, well, I know it's before Magneto. I think it's probably, so this is without Nightcrawler and Magneto. There are good things that came out of Magneto, but I don't know that's necessarily going to play into what this deck is looking to do. But it occurred to me that this is just sitting here. This is my friend's deck, and so I will also put this into the show notes. I'm not going to go over everything in here. Some of these we've already talked about. Some of them are new cards, but yes, this is Blast the Dudes by Talkin' Snicked Podcast, and like I said, I'll put it in the show notes so you can read through all this stuff. I completely overlooked it as I was doing everything, and then I was editing going, well, shucks, this deck is sitting right there. Now, let's talk about the Nemesis and Obligation. And we are back to talk about the Obligation. Lost Visor, which we give to the Scott Summers player. You search your hand, deck, discard pile, and play area for Ruby Quartz Visor and place it face down under this card. Cyclops cannot attack. That's super weighted. And then Alter Ego action, exhaust Scott Summers, add Ruby Quartz Visor to your hand, and remove Lost Visor from the game. This is an interesting Obligation because obviously it takes away your Visor if you had it out in play. But in every other instance, it just goes and tutors it for you and puts it somewhere where you can get it really easily. As I believe Ryan put it, it's as if Cyclops is looking for his glasses and they're in his hand. But I do think that this does come with attacks. Since you cannot attack, you do need to address this, relatively quickly. You are hampered by the fact that, for the most part, your tactics are kind of lessened because they are temporary. You can't really afford to put tactics onto something because you need to go down to Alter Ego first. I think it's well designed. I do think that it does come with its advantages because you can find that visor that is so important. Overall, just cool Obligation. I would say it's like an 8 out of 10 Obligation. Moving on to his Nemesis, we've got Mr. Sinister, a 1 scheme, 1 attack minion that is Elite Marauder with 6 health. He has Stalwart, Toughness, and Villainous. He is very stacked. And he has the boost ability of you are stunned. If you are already stunned, take 2 damage. In my mind, he's a relatively benign minion to take care of. Obviously, when he shows up, I think the threat that he poses is the fact that you don't know. I mean, I guess every minion you don't know when they're going to show up, but he can show up and really kind of mess you up a little bit. I think that as just a minion, I think that he is obviously going to take a little bit of work to take down, but frankly, if you you can just full blast him away. You can just optic blast, take the tough off, and then just hit him for 8. And that can be really fun. But I think that you can't necessarily judge the Nemesis minion, without also thinking about the side scheme, which is genetic manipulation. Side scheme with 2 threat per player. It has the amplify icon, and when defeated, search the encounter deck and discard pile for a copy of Gene Therapy and reveal it. Then you shuffle. I think that having these 2 in play, I think really paints a picture of what you should come to expect. I'm not that scared of Mr. Sinister. Obviously, if you're worried about genetic manipulation, you will get rid of it. And then you're going to worry about Gene Therapy. But for the most part, I would say that I'm going to prioritize just defeating the scenario over worrying about Mr. Sinister if I can. He doesn't have guard, so I think you're probably fine. But let's get into the other cards, because what is Gene Therapy? Gene Therapy is a attachment. It is attached to the enemy with the lowest printed attack without a copy of Gene Therapy attached. Otherwise, this card gains Surge, and it gives +2 attack and the forced interrupt of when attached enemy attacks, the attack gains Overkill and Piercing, and at the end of this attack, discard Gene Therapy. I would say you're going to want to just get rid of Mr. Sinister so that he is not the target of Gene Therapy. In fact, if you can, get rid of genetic manipulation, get Gene Therapy into play, and if you can just have it gain Surge, I don't know if that's the worst thing in the world either. I guess you have to kind of like really gauge what could happen, but if you're prepared for something if you're prepared for basically any other part of the encounter deck, hitting Gene Therapy and having it Surge is not going to be the worst thing in the world. I think this is a cool card, though. I think just taking a enemy and just souping them up for a turn for 1 attack is actually pretty benign and pretty thematic. Sinister is messing with minions, and you have to pay for it. And the last card is Concussive Force. It is a treachery. When revealed in Alter Ego, if Mr. Sinister is in play, he schemes. Otherwise, place 2 threat on the main scheme. And then when revealed in Hero, if Mr. Sinister is in play, he attacks. Otherwise, take 2 damage. So because he is villainous with 1/1, that means that this could be better, could be worse than just having Mr. Sinister. If Mr. Sinister is in play, this could be worse, could be better than just him, doing his thing. Overall, I think it's also just kind of cool because it's so dependent on Mr. Sinister. It's not saying that the villain does something. It's just very honed in on Mr. Sinister in a way that I think is really cool. Additionally, I guess I hadn't really considered this, that Mr. Sinister has the Marauder trait, which makes him playing in On the Run, where all the Marauders gain guard, a little bit more interesting. That actually would be very thematic, and maybe I should play a round of Cyclops against the Marauders in a situation where I know Mr. Sinister is going to be in play, because that would be pretty cool. Especially if you go into the second half and you have to find a Marauder. Either way, yeah. So that is it. That is the Nemesis pack. Let me see here. We got that is Cyclops. Overall, I think Cyclops is a much better hero than I first gave him credit for. When I was first getting into the game, I kind of thought Cyclops was weird. He kind of had this weird gimmick. But overall, I've grown to see why he is the kind of hero that people would go to. He plays on multiple aspects. He can pull in allies on multiple aspects. But I think that I can see a case for him to be a pretty good aggression hero, because I do think that he plays really well with attack events. I think he's very well-rounded, and I think that makes it for a hero that can express himself in many different ways. And overall, I think that he's just a cool multiplayer hero. I think he's a good single-player hero, and I think his kit is actually really, really tight. But until next time, when we will be talking about Colossus, because I'm putting Kitty off as much as possible. Yeah, what is your favorite card in the kit? My favorite card, like I said, was Field Commander. What is your favorite card? But until next time, thank you for your time, and have a great day.